people don't want to feel sold when they're talking about their health. And so if we can provide that clarity for them in advance by giving really good education, it makes the process of visiting with the audiologist so much more streamlined, number one. And number two, it's better for the patient because they will already have a lot of that pitch, so to speak, already understand, and then they can go in with more educated questions.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Technology of Beauty, where I have the opportunity to interview the movers and shakers of the beauty business, and today is no exception. Today in Manhattan Beach studio right here, we have Dr. Jeff Trankel. He's come from Manhattan Beach to Manhattan Beach. It's the closest guest we've ever had here on this program. Welcome, Jeff. Did you walk here?
I should have, but I did the lazy California thing and took the car.
Well, you were doing surgery today, weren't you?
Yeah, I had surgery this morning.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
We'll get into that in a minute. Let's start with the beginning. Where were you born?
Loma Linda, California, so not too far away.
Uh-huh. And did you grow up in that part of the Inland Empire there, Loma Linda area?
I did. Grew up in Redlands, California.
Sure.
Spent most of my entire youth there. Went to college at UC Riverside and La Sierra, and so spent pretty much my whole upbringing in the Inland Empire, and then did my training in Pomona. I'm a DO, so at the osteopathic school in Pomona there, Western University, and then
right, sure.
And then finally left California for Michigan, where I did my 5 years of residency, and kind of traveled all over the Midwest. It was nice to get out of California. Those of us that are born in California often never leave. And so experiencing different parts of the U.S. and the different cultures and the different weathers.
Yeah, sure. So you were in Michigan for 5 years. Mm-hmm. What city in Michigan?
I lived in a city called Royal Oak, just outside of Detroit itself. It's a post-grad town. A lot of U of M grads or Michigan State grads end up there in their first couple of years. And my residency program was really close by, and it was a fun town to live in at that age.
And then did you come directly here to Southern California?
Yeah. So, came out of residency and bought a practice in East Los Angeles kind of right away. And my wife wanted to be in Los Angeles, so I, of course, wanted to be in Los Angeles. Yeah, there's no other option.
Happy wife, happy life.
That's right. So we actually looked at a practice early on in the Redlands area, but we just wanted to be in LA. And so stars kind of aligned and worked out super well. Bought a really small practice, just one other doc that was, agent doc. The hospital needed someone to take call, so they brought me on, and 5 employees, 2 phone lines, and away we went.
And what year was that?
2014. Yeah, so just a decade ago. Yeah.
Okay, and so when did you then move to the South Bay?
So we spent a year in Pasadena. That's where we thought we wanted to be.
Okay.
And it was hot. It was hot there, and we felt a bit landlocked. So then we had an exciting year in downtown LA during the as everyone was kind of moving there. We were there while Whole Foods was opening. Mm-hmm. So we wanted to live our kind of like urban experience in a high rise. Our son was just been born, so he was turning 1 while we lived there. And then we found out while we were there that we were pregnant with our second, and so hard to live in a high rise in downtown LA. And so we were looking for places to be. We had searched around Pasadena, like Los Feliz, kind of other LA basins, and then we realized very quickly that the South Bay was like such a dream for raising kids, the weather, being around the beach. And so we had a close friend who grew up out here or had been living here since like residency. And so we had exposure. We didn't know as many people then, so we would visit them, and we were like, this isn't a bad commute. It would take me, I only lived about 12 minutes from the hospital in Pasadena, but it would take me 45 minutes to an hour to get in and out. It would take me the same from Redondo Beach, and I was like, this is why am I not driving home to the beach, So, yeah.
So did you keep that practice in Pasadena?
Yeah, so we have the original practice we bought in East Los Angeles was our first. We have now 12. We're opening 13 tomorrow, and 14 next month. And this year I think we're gonna try to open between 4 and 5 more. So we're trying to make our way to about 20 in the next 12 months or so.
We'll get to that.
Yeah.
So let's let everybody know, first of all, you're an otolaryngologist or ENT, and you also do aesthetics and you do audiology,
Yep.
which we're going to get to since I got my hearing tested the other day in one of your offices.
Yeah.
So when you started, were you primarily ENT doing the things that we think of ear, nose, and throat, or otolaryngology?
Yeah. When I started, and even now, the base of our practice is general otolaryngology. So tubes and tonsils in kids is a big one that people know about, septoplasties and sinus surgeries. And then, we take care of a number of different things with the ears and the nose and voice as well for the singers, et cetera.
Okay.
So there's a lot of nuance to it, but yeah, it's a lot of general otolaryngology.
And you mentioned having all these practices. Do you work in all those practices?
No, I started most of them. So what I've done as kind of the entrepreneur side is usually we open a new location and I try to be the person who opens it, and then I build it and then I give it to someone else and I move on to the next one. Now as we're scaling faster, I'm not able to do that. So many of the locations that we're opening now, I may never step foot in, to be honest with you. Who knows?
Okay.
But I at this point, I only work in 2 offices and I just operate at a lot of different hospitals.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when you said give them to, I can't imagine you're actually giving them away.
No, I'm giving away the buildup of the patient population and kind of pass it along to an associate who's coming on so that they don't have to do the heavy lift of, being when you're a new practitioner in an area, you got to go, knock on doors, shake hands, kiss babies, do all the things that you do to build a practice. So that's something I like doing. So I go and do it, and then we have a referral base, and I just kind of slide out the back door and let the associate in.
Okay. And are the practices straight otolaryngology? Do they have med spas? Is it aesthetics also? What do they look like?
Yeah, so they're mainly otolaryngology. We do have a couple people in our practice that are also facial plastics, and so they do mostly surgical. We used to run essentially not a day spa, but we had lasers, did a lot of fillers and Botox, etc. During the pandemic, we had to stop doing that for obvious. It was a small part of our practice, so we took it out in order to move our attention to a COVID test company that we started, which I'm sure we'll talk more about. But then when the pandemic when we got through the other side, it became a lower priority for us to do aesthetic because our niche in the community is more general otolaryngology. And so our facial plastics people mostly do surgical. So rhinoplasties is probably the biggest one, both functionally and aesthetically. They do a lot of rhinoplasties. Yeah.
So COVID hit, and you moved into a very interesting area. Why don't you share with us what you did when COVID hit?
It was. It feels like a lifetime ago now.
It sure does.
We had a relatively good size company at the time. At least for us, we felt like it was big, and we had a big payroll and a lot of mouths to feed, et cetera. And so when it happened, they kind of shut down all elective surgeries for me as an ENT, and we said, what are we going to do? We don't want to lay everyone off and start from scratch. So my wife had the brilliant idea of why don't we test for this virus? And I said, that's crazy. Why would we do that? And then we thought about it for another second, and then we immediately called Influx and said, can you build us a website? And within
Influx
24 hours, there it was built.
You mean Max?
Yeah.
Our producer and director sitting right there?
That's right. That's the very same one. So, so we started a COVID test company that was really meant to kind of give back. We were mostly working with first responders. So at the time, there was no swabs. So we found a lab through a friend of mine who's in New York. He's a cardiovascular thoracic surgeon. He knew someone at Rutgers who was basically pioneering this saliva-based test. So we had to buy them all and give them away for free. But we opened the doors for telehealth consultations and first responder testing. And we started with that at one of our locations that had the ability to kind of drive through. And we were in hazmat suits. We hand this thing through the thing with a stick. Lauren and I would burn all our clothes at the end of the day. And we did 15 tests, and we were like, wow, that was crazy. And then, we built that up. We worked with Department of Public Health very closely, and we provided a lot of testing that others wouldn't. So we would be under bridges, in the homeless populations, kind of all over the place. And at its peak, we were doing 5,000 to 8,000 tests a day. And
a day, 5,000 to 8,000.
Yeah, we had about 25 somewhere between 25 and 30 locations from San Diego up to San Francisco, just filling a void and a gap in the community that other people wouldn't fill. And that was kind of just where we played in that space. There was obviously the big companies that were doing it, all for cash, et cetera. And so we tried to help the underserved population, which is what our ENT practice generally also focuses on, is helping serve underserved and underinsured. And so we tried to fill that gap and fill it. We kind of did. So it was a master class in business and scale, and met so many interesting people along the way, had so many big clients, and played in spaces that I never thought I'd be playing in, and pitching to really, really large companies, our testing company, and what we could do to help. So yeah, it was very beneficial for me as an entrepreneur to go through that process.
I bet.
And like I said, I probably learned 20 years worth of business in like 3 years or something. So that was a very incredible experience overall. And we enjoyed it. It was very long hours, very stressful, but it was overall we had a good time. We look back on a lot of it fondly.
I bet. So then, as COVID started trailing off, the need for testing also went down. And did you then start building these new practices? Is that when that sort of? Well, I know you already had multiple practices, but is that when the acquisition mode started?
Yeah, kind of. So we always knew that we had hoped, what we wanted to accomplish was to build a testing company off the back of COVID testing and have kind of a separate business. And what we found was there was so much fatigue at the end of it. It wasn't super feasible, as you've seen with the Same Day Healths and a lot of these other companies that did a lot of COVID testing. They haven't really been able to pivot because I think so many people were so sick of being tested. And so, but on the other side of that, a big part of it was we also knew that our core business was going to be ENT on the other side of the pandemic. And so we maintained it. We poured most of our time, attention, all of our captains, we moved everyone over to this testing company, but we left people in charge that we knew were capable, and we continued to not necessarily grow it, but make sure it had its bones and its structure. And then, as we had kind of planned, on the other side of the pandemic, so many people fled Los Angeles, doctor-wise. There's massive gaps still, but there was really massive gaps, especially at the beginning. So we then used that as a opportunity, I guess is a word, but also to continue to fill gaps like we always have, to be like, okay, well, now just there's whatever need there are in different communities that haven't had an ENT in some amount of time, that's where we kind of step in.
Okay. And farthest north and farthest south of, on east and west, in terms of 17, you're opening in 18?
We're 12
Where do they
now.
go from and to?
Most of them are LA Basin. So in the LA area, we have from Hollywood down to Montebello on the east side, which I think where you had visited, and then up to Hawthorne here in the South Bay. So we're Hawthorne, Manhattan Beach border, so like right by LAX.
Okay.
And then kind of a bunch in between. And then our distant offices, we have one up in Palmdale, and then we have one out in Palm Springs.
Okay, so
And
that's the furthest east.
Those are the farthest remote facilities. And then as we grow, we're growing. A lot of it, the growth is east toward filling the gap between LA and Palm Springs.
So in the Inland Empire.
Yeah.
And tell me, are you working with private equity, or how are you capitalizing this?
Yeah, to date it's been self-leveraged, which has been enjoyable.
I bet.
But
that's a big nut.
What we've seen is that the growth, as we've scaled, it only leads to more scale. And so, as we continue to grow, it only leads to more growth. And that becomes harder and harder to scale, especially in the environment that we're in, with, after First Republic closing and a lot of funding becoming more challenging from traditional loans and banks. Then it kind of, okay, so what do you do next? How do you get the money that you want to grow if you want to grow at that pace? So we looked at the options of private equity, venture cap, doing a Series A, like any other angel investors, et cetera. And actually talked to a couple of people in our neighborhoods, and there's a lot of finance people here in Manhattan Beach, and eventually kind of landed on venture cap. And so worked with some people that I kind of knew somewhat indirectly, but people that I had consulted for in the past. And so there was a little bit of trust there, which helped. and ultimately spent the last 18 months kind of, changing your books over to accrual base and doing all the things you have to do to adjust from, a small practice to a business that needs to scale more. So going through that process has been a massive learning curve in terms of business structure, in terms of raising capital, stuff that you have learned a lot about, but as you can remember before you ever did any of it, it's just like foreign language to us, right?
Sure.
As physicians. So so now we are inking a deal with VentureCap as we speak, kind of, and then the goal will be to scale as fast as possible over the next few years, and hopefully bring on other partners and other practices that we can help them grow as well, allowing them to be themselves, so to speak, but
Right.
under an umbrella with good centralized services, support, the ability to hire and fire, HR, things like that. Things that practices have a challenge with when there are like one or two, physician groups.
Sure.
And if we can allow them also a potential exit strategy long term, then that's the goal that we're trying to do, is fulfill. Realistically, at a high level, we're trying to keep private practice alive, in the best form we can, without all the major challenges that go along with private practice, especially in the insurance world, taking contracts and all of that kind of stuff. There's a lot of aging accounts receivables, and like, how do you contract? How do you not get hosed by the insurance company with your rates? And so that's where we want to try to come in, is like allow these other doctors our centralized services and help negotiating those, but allow them to fly free, so to speak, and do what they want to do, rather than being like, hey, you're under my thumb now, you have to do how I want,
Right.
So yeah, that's the goal. We'll see how well I'm able to accomplish that.
And
part.
your goal is to get to the number 20 or somewhere around there?
Yeah, that's just kind of like a quick, long term. I have no idea what it will be. It would be really cool to retire.
Will you take it public at that point? Are you going to recap it or sell it?
I don't know. I think that's definitely something I'll lean on the VentureCap team to advise on, because I don't really know, what's the advantage to selling to private equity versus going public, or versus doing one before the other, et cetera.
Right.
So I think those are all openings, and that's, I try to somewhat one step at a time, if you will. But obviously, end goal will be some kind of like liquidation event where I'm able to pull something out and continue to allow for the docs in my practice to operate the way that they're operating, and create something that's even more scalable than it is right now, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Well, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, you've done a number of other things. One of the things I'd like to ask you about next is about the audiology pursuit and so forth, and a little bit about Clarity for that matter. But so tell us a little bit about audiology and hearing aids and all the rest.
Yeah, absolutely. Most ENT practices have an audiology practice of some kind associated with them in some capacity. And obviously, we see a lot of patients that have hearing loss. And so rather than sending them off to, whatever Hear USA or is around, they like it if they can be somewhat internal. And the main reason for that is we know who the audiologist is. It's not going to be a random person. It's someone that we don't control, but we can say, like, we know, like, when there's an issue, we can call on them to help get people in quickly, or if they have an urgent or emergent situation with their hearing, etc. And then secondary is financially, obviously, from a business perspective, being able to be a part of the sales. And there's a lot of business structure that goes around that, so that you don't violate anti-kickback laws and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But there are ways to structure it. And so as we grow, we have not focused on it primarily, because we've been so focused on growing the core business, obviously. But that's definitely a big piece of it, is we want to grow in parallel the ability to do what we've done with ENT on the hearing aid side. And then, as you alluded to, the Clarity Technologies piece of it. And so, as you're very well aware, you got me involved in that multiple years ago. And the main reason I became an investor at that time was that I saw this massive potential in the audiology space. And the reason why, I'm sure you've talked about Clarity on the program before, but as a quick recap, the ability to provide patients education preemptively is so invaluable. And from an audiology perspective, it's probably the most valuable ad you could do, because the bulk of our patients with hearing loss, as you noticed as a patient, is that you have no idea anything about it from a medical or technical standpoint. What's out there is, do I need a hearing aid? Do I not? And most people immediately are on guard that they do not want a hearing aid. That's like the gut reaction to anyone when they find out they have hearing loss, right? I don't want a hearing aid. First thing out of their mouths. And so breaking down that barrier as the doctor, passing that along to the audiologist and having them break down that same barrier, and then describing why you need a specific type of hearing aid, right? Because that's a big part of it, is like, why do you need a Toyota Camry versus, a Lexus versus a Rolls Royce? Like, what's the difference between these things? And it's all a sale in a sense. So people don't want to feel sold when they're talking about their health. And so if we can provide that clarity for them in advance by giving really good education, it makes the process of visiting with the audiologist so much more streamlined, number one. And number two, it's better for the patient because they will already have a lot of that pitch, so to speak, already understand, and then they can go in with more educated questions. Hey, I've read more about OTC, over-the-counter hearing aids and Apple AirPods and blah, blah. Why would I need a hearing aid that's, $3,000 or $5,000 or $7,000 when I could just buy a pair of AirPods, And now that specific direct question comes with a core level of understanding that is much easier to, discuss with the patient. So I'm very excited. I was, again, as you know, named on the board of directors for Clarity in February to help lead the charge on the audiology side of it. And I'm super excited to start the pilot programs and really get that out there because I think it's going to make a really meaningful impact, both for the company and in terms of, being able to generate more sales and bring on more customers and clients, and also for the patients. I'm just excited to have it in my lobby and have the ability for patients to go and look at that.
Yeah, it's going to streamline the whole process too.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think probably abbreviate the consultation.
Yeah.
That's what we've seen in ophthalmology with intraocular lenses.
Yeah.
It's cut the consult times in half.
Yeah,
and the conversion to the premium lenses is doubled and tripled and even more in some cases.
Yeah.
And I'm sure and I don't know anything about hearing aids except that I know that's a huge range from over the counter all the way up to these Rolls Royces you were just talking about.
Yeah,
and knowing about that ahead of time is certainly best for the consumer and probably best for the provider also.
Yeah.
Because it's a learning curve. And hearing loss is affecting a lot of the boomers, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a big deal. And I had never even thought about it.
Yeah.
Which is just amazing to me.
Yeah, I mean,
I was happy to find out from your audiologist that I didn't need a hearing aid.
I know. I was surprised after what you had told me over the phone. I was like, I was expecting you to have a moderate hearing loss, and yeah, your ears are great.
That was pretty good.
Yeah,
I couldn't believe it. I still have the tinnitus, but
yeah,
and it's not too bad. But yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Well, clearly you're a serial entrepreneur. What other things are you doing?
Oh man, my accountant, every time I call him, the first thing he asks me is, "What harebrained idea do you have now?" And so, yeah, we're playing in a lot of kind of random spaces right now, trying to, figure out as we're growing our current company, what we're also going to do, in 5 years and 10 years and, what's going to be next. So, my daughter rides horses. And so we've been living in that space, which has been super fun to be a part of, but it's a very niche space, right? With very specific types of people.
Is that dressage?
Not dressage, but hunter jumper.
Hunter
basically.
jumper,
Yeah.
okay.
And it's super fun to watch her ride. And as any true entrepreneur does, you can't do anything without looking at it as a business opportunity. And so, my wife and I are already looking at what opportunities are in this space to kind of revolutionize and change the way things are done. And there's actually quite a bit in there. And so the way our company works, I'm the CEO and my wife is the COO, and she's an insanely good COO. And that is why we're as successful as we are. It's all operations based. I always joke with people that we're we're the Houstons of medical practices. The whole thing goes around because of our operations. Our doctors are just there for show, kind of. So she's just really good at managing people, managing situations, streamlining, making sure nothing's falling through cracks, all that kind of stuff. And so I'm always looking for opportunities to leverage her skill set in areas, and we've got a number of different ideas of how we can enter this equestrian space, because I think that at the end of the day, what we've started to do really is kind of we're running a franchise in many ways with the ENT practice. We can open up a clinic pretty simply at this point in terms of these are the steps that we take. This is what we institute here. We roll through it. We have, we don't even, Lauren and I don't even go to the locations most of the time. We have people that can do that now. And so that same kind of operational throughput can be put to all sorts of other things. So I played around with the idea of opening Baskin Robbins and, Taco Bells or whatever. But, you just couldn't get excited about food. And so we've been constantly on the look for what's next. And I have a feeling equestrian is a big part of it. So the Influx team has already built a website for it. So we'll see where it takes us, but it's going to be somewhere in that space for sure. That's one. I think on the medical side, I'm teasing through an idea with AI billing that I think has a lot of potential, which, that's still very, very early stages. And then in COVID, we built a software to help deliver all the test results because there was a big gap. It was really challenging. As you know, you do a lab test, how do you get it to patients?
Right.
And so that was a major gap. So most of the companies that did large-scale COVID testing were tech companies that kind of layered a test into it, and it was really just pushing results out. And people made tens of billions of dollars just delivering random results, So we built that software. It was fun, and we did it with some partners who have their own jobs as well. And so there's a couple of softwares we're trying to develop internally to help streamline different aspects of our practice that are challenging, such as contracting, credentialing, and things like that. And so we're hoping to develop some of these softwares, and then, we'll be the MVP as our practice, make sure that we work out the kinks, figure out how to scale that, and then kind of push forward from there. So those are
That's
a couple
exciting.
of things, yeah.
So you have a number of websites. I was researching a little bit, and you've got how many? Is it 15, 20 websites, something like that?
Yeah, I tend to want to build a website every time I come up with any idea, which is probably for better or worse. But I don't know how many we have at this point, but it's quite a few. And I feel like I'll start a website before I start a business for some reason. It's pretty backwards, but yeah, we have quite a few websites.
So tell us about a few of them that you haven't talked about. I'm curious.
Most of them are all the stuff that I've kind of described right now.
Okay.
We're also looking at potentially starting a transportation company. We work with people in that kind of space all the time, just getting rides and giving rides, etc. And it's kind of why aren't we playing in this space? And so we built out a website for that. We're going to see what kind of traffic we can generate. And I mostly do I like to do these ventures with someone else who can be the face of that company, and my job is to layer on the business side of it. Starting the next one we're building, a friend of mine, I'm a avid pickleball player here in Manhattan Beach, so I love playing pickleball. So of course can't play pickleball without building a company out of it. So a buddy of mine and I are starting a pickleball paddle company, and so we're gonna. Obviously, there's a whole nother website to build there that we're kind of starting the process of, and obviously layering the small business aspect.
So you're going to build the paddles? Okay.
We won't build them ourselves, but we have multiple sources. We have 3 different factories in China. We're also looking inland as well. I found someone in Florida, and I have another friend who, most of the people that build things like paddles do aerospace stuff because it's all carbon fiber. So they're either building drones or they're doing F-16s or something. They're doing something legitimate, and they're like, oh, I'll make a paddle, And so at least the U.S.-based ones. And so, that side of it is kind of it's been interesting to find these manufacturers that do this. It's a whole other area and space that I never thought I'd be meddling in, but it is kind of funny when we're like, oh, can you help me? But they're like, well, he's got a $15 billion order for drones from the Department of Defense. But yeah, I could take an hour to talk to you about a pickleball paddle. You're like,
unbelievable.
Yeah. We're like, I guess it's not that important, but
So you're clearly a serial entrepreneur. It's in your blood. It's in your DNA.
Yeah.
Do you still do surgery as an ENT and otolaryngologist? Do you still do patient care in the form of surgical patient care?
Yeah. I'm still my partner in our practice is our busiest practitioner, but I'm definitely our second. I think the most surgeries I've done in the last 6 months in 1 month is like 80 in
Okay.
a month. So I'm
So
very
20 a week.
Yeah, basically. And so in general, I probably do still anywhere between 15 and 20 a week when I'm in town. And so, yeah, still super busy as a ENT surgeon as well. So that's the challenge, right? It's like, where do you find time to be a super busy surgeon? Number one, be a CEO. Number two, or, between those two, 1A, 1B, so to speak.
Right.
And then like all of this other side stuff, like I don't know what I'm doing. My wife is very upset whenever I come up with another harebrained idea. She's like, where are you gonna do? When are you gonna do that?
That's incredible.
Yeah.
So you've seen so much, and I'm curious what you see in the future. I mean, you've gone through a few things you're going to develop, but if you look into your crystal ball, what's the next 5 or 10 years look like to you?
Yeah.
In aesthetics or in ENT or in any of these areas you've talked about, or all of them for that matter?
Yeah, I'm sure my primary focus will continue to be on my main practice and growing it, scaling it, turning it into something legacy that I can be super proud of, at the end of my career, and be able to like look back upon that and say, wow, like I can't believe that was ours, that we built that,
Right.
That's probably number one. Ultimately I would love to be able to, travel abroad and live abroad for multiple months and at a time, and be able to do my job without being here and present. So while I'll always be a surgeon, I can't ever imagine giving it up at least like 1 or 2 days a week, or like as a part-time. I'd really, this being on the board of Clarity and starting this kind of process in my career is definitely something I see as important. I think it's a way that, as you know very well, you can still be active, and you can still be a part of building, because I love building, and I'll always want to be a builder. And so being on board of directors and being able to give advice to either young entrepreneurs or, same age entrepreneurs, and just like being a part of how things are done, the best practices in that specific space. So I'd love to someday kind of do what you do a lot of, which is like being on a lot of board of directors and being an investor, active investor, and being able to touch those businesses, maybe not being the main person, but being able to be a part of it. And then I'm sure I'll always have my hand in these small little things that are just enjoyable and fun to do,
I'm sure you will.
Yeah.
I have absolutely no doubt at all. Well, I want to tell you, I'm very impressed, and I'm sure our listeners and watchers are also.
Oh, thank you.
It's very impressive. You've done a lot in a very short period of time.
Well, thanks. I am very thankful for all of the advice you've given me over these years as well. I didn't mention it enough, but you have been very instrumental in helping and being able to use you as a soundboard.
You're very kind.
Yeah.
You and your wife are truly remarkable, and I'm really impressed. And I want to thank you for coming all the way from Martyrs down the street.
Yeah.
We had guests today from all over the world, literally, and every guest today took a plane to get here, except you.
Except me.
You could walk home.
I didn't even drive past an airport.
Yeah, that's right. Well, it's been an absolute delight and a pleasure, and I look forward to working with you more in all these different endeavors.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a blast.
Yeah, good. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And I'm glad all of you joined in this exciting episode of The Technology of Beauty. And as you can see, we had a chance to interview a mover and shaker in the beauty business and in business in general. Dr. Jeff Trenkle, thank you very much again, Jeff. And thank you, all of you, for joining us on today's program. Be sure to tune in every Tuesday for a new program. You can go to YouTube or any of your other feeds for the podcast, like Apple Podcasts and so forth. We look forward to seeing you. Take care. Have a great week.